Jerry's Book Tree.
Scooby-Doo and the Marsh Monster by Jesse Leon McCann. For Dee and Terry Masters, Night of Punch, Judy, and Bursting into Flame. Scooby-Doo and his pals from Mystery Inc. were about to start their summer rafting vacation on the River Wild. They were renting equipment from Mr. Smalls, a kindly old gentleman. The gang was all set to have a lot of fun, but then they met some unhappy river rafters who had just had a horrible experience. The rafters introduced themselves. Their names were Gemma, Martin, and Ben. "We were supposed to float down the river for 3 days and camp on the shore of the river each night," Gemma said. "On the second day, we were attacked by a terrible monster," Ben exclaimed. "Zoinks!" cried Shaggy. "A monster?" "Monster?" Scooby gulped. "A big oily monster," exclaimed Martin. "It looked like a man, but it was covered from head to toe with something slimy and sludgy." "It gave an evil roar and knocked us into the water," Gemma said. "We were so scared, we hightailed it back here right away." "Oh, I'm so sorry this happened to you," exclaimed Mr. Smalls. "I'll give you a full refund, don't you worry." "We're sorry, Mr. Smalls, but we can't continue coming here if we have to worry about strange creatures attacking us," Martin said sadly. The disappointed campers packed up their car and drove away. Just then, a pair of men who were hiking by stopped to talk to Mr. Smalls. The leader of the pair was a very rich man named Jeremiah Peabody. With him was his assistant, Hank. "Tough luck, old sport." Peabody smiled at Mr. Smalls. "If your business is being ruined by this marsh monster, perhaps you should reconsider my offer. Sell your land to me. It might save you a lot of grief." "Oh no," Mr. Smalls said sadly. "What am I going to do? I don't want to sell my land to Peabody. I just know he'll turn this place into a toxic dump for his factories." "Don't worry, Mr. Smalls," Fred assured him. "We'll solve this marsh monster mystery for you." "Like, no way, Fred," cried Shaggy. "I'm not going near any marshes or monsters, and I'm sure not going near any marsh monsters." "Either," agreed Scooby, shaking his head. But after Velma negotiated with a sack of Scooby snacks, Shaggy and Scooby agreed to help Mr. Smalls too. The kids packed for their trip. Fred, Velma, and Daphne brought life jackets, a rope, helmet, and a first aid kit. Shaggy and Scooby brought lots of food. Lots and lots of food. "I'm afraid we can't fit all that food," said Daphne. "But don't worry, guys. We'll find lots of delicious nuts and berries to eat along the way," Velma told them. "Groovy," Shaggy rubbed his belly. "Like, I'm just nuts over nuts and berries." "Rhea!" Scooby licked his lips. "Ruts and berries." The gang set out, coasting down the beautiful Blue River, enjoying the pleasant countryside and refreshing mountain air. But soon, things started going wrong. Shaggy and Scooby kept seeing something creepy in the bushes. It seemed to be following the gang's raft. Then, as the river began to flow faster, they saw that somebody, or something, had torn out the sign telling them which way they should go. "Jinkies!" Velma exclaimed. "Without that sign, we could be headed right into the rapids, and we won't even know it." The gang had two choices in picking the right fork in the river to take. Unfortunately, they picked the wrong one. Soon the river was going from calm to choppy. Big boulders appeared in the water, and the gang had to steer around them as quickly as they could. Then the river tumbled swiftly downhill, faster and faster. There were more and more rocks in the water. They were rafting through whitewater rapids. The kids valiantly struggled to stay afloat in the churning waters. "Zoinks!" Shaggy cried. "I feel like I'm a milkshake that's about to be blended." "Oh no!" Scooby hollered as he held on for dear life. And though the rushing river was loud, they could hear laughter. Strange, creepy laughter. When it looked as if they surely tumble into the dangerous water, the Fiend spotted something up ahead. Over there, try and steer that direction. The Fiend was pointing to a small stream that flowed off the main river. They dug their oars into the water and steered with all their might. After a few nervous moments, they were floating swiftly down the small stream. Wow, that was close. Fred wiped the sweat from his brow. The kids were glad they'd gotten away from the rapids safely, but they still had the strange feeling they were being followed. We should make camp here for the night, Fred suggested. I want to explore this area before it's too dark. I have a feeling that whatever happened to that sign was no accident. The gang set up camp in a dry spot in the woods. As they worked, the fog got thicker and thicker. Everything was quiet and still until they suddenly heard footsteps crunching through leaves. Jeepers, who's that? The Fiend cried as a huge figure appeared through the mist. Zoinks! Shaggy bellowed. It's a marsh monster! Ruh-roh! Scooby jumped into Shaggy's arms and held on tight. But instead of a marsh monster, it was a man. A very large man. I may be as big as a bear, but I'm as friendly as a puppy. He laughed. They call me Big Dave, and I live in this forest. The kids were all glad Big Dave wasn't the marsh monster. They invited him to join them for dinner. When they asked him if he'd seen the marsh monster, he said he hadn't, but he did talk about another kind of villain. Some people are trying to wreck this forest by using it for a toxic dumping ground, Big Dave told them sadly. Jinkies, Velma frowned. It would be terrible to ruin a beautiful forest like this. As everyone turned in for the night, they thought carefully about what Big Dave had told them. In the morning, Big Dave said goodbye. He even gave them a going-away present. Delicious nuts and berries from the forest. Thanks, Big Dave, Velma waved. After we've solved the marsh monster mystery, we'll do everything we can to save this forest. After they drifted down the stream a couple miles, Fred spotted a clue. Something big had broken tree branches near the edge of the water. It could be the marsh monster, Fred said as he steered the raft ashore. Come on, gang, let's investigate. Shaggy and Scooby weren't too keen on getting out of the raft. When they finally did, they insisted on taking their sacks of food with them. Like, there's no way I'm gonna get grabbed by a greasy gull on an empty stomach, Shaggy declared firmly. Rather, Scooby agreed. The kids crept carefully past the broken branches and into the forest. After they'd gone a few hundred feet, Fred stopped suddenly. Do you guys hear that? He asked. Like what? Shaggy asked nervously. All at once, a huge form jumped out from behind a tree. It was oily, it was slimy, it was the marsh monster! Row! It growled fiercely. The Mystery Inc. gang ran as fast as they could back toward the raft. Zoinks! Puffed Shaggy. Now that I heard, but I wish I hadn't! The marsh monster was fast, but the gang was faster. Well, most of them were. Scooby and Shaggy couldn't bear to part with their food, even though they were in danger. Soon they were trapped. As the marsh monster slowly approached them, Shaggy and Scooby looked at each other with dread. Like Scoob, old pal, you know what we have to do, Shaggy cried. Scooby was sobbing. Right-roll! With that, they both started throwing their food at the marsh monster. The marsh monster didn't like getting pelted with food one bit. It backed off. When they saw their chance, Shaggy and Scooby ran for it. When they got back to the others, Velma and Tuffing started dressing Shaggy and Scooby in tree and bush branches. Just in time, Fred smiled. We've got a plan, and we need you guys as bait. After the girls were done, Scooby and Shaggy were fully camouflaged in leaves. Like, what a day! Shaggy exclaimed. First we lose our food, and now we might end up as Golly Grub. Rolly Grub? Scooby cried. Oh no! Shaggy and Scooby ventured back into the forest, looking for the marsh monster. Covered with branches and leaves, you were able to sneak right up next to it. Shaggy tapped the creature on the shoulder. Like, isn't this a marvelous costume party? Shaggy grinned. My pal and I came as matching foliage, but I see you went for the garbage disposal look. Roll! The angry marsh monster was soon chasing them through the forest again. Scooby and Shaggy climbed into the trees to stay out of its slimy clutches. Hey, Scooby! Shaggy called as they climbed across branches, hopping from tree to tree. Like, you're doing pretty good. I always thought dogs couldn't climb trees. Rocks ran rhyme reese! Scooby gulped. Then he promptly fell to the ground. Zoinks! Like, maybe I shouldn't have said that, cried Shaggy. He dropped down to the ground with Scooby. The two took off running. The marsh monster was gaining on them. They could hardly keep out of the fiend's oily grasp. Scooby-Doo and Shaggy ran toward the river, heading right to the spot that Fred had told them about. They passed the fiend hiding behind the trunk of a tree. She signaled to Velma and Fred. The marsh monster reached his slimy hand towards Scooby and Shaggy. It was just inches from grabbing them. Now! Cried Fred. He and Velma leaned on an oar they'd wedged under a big boulder. Splash! The boulder hit the water. Suddenly, the fast-moving current of the river was diverted, right at the marsh monster. Whoosh! The powerful rush of water knocked the monster off its slimy feet. Fred quickly tied up the marsh monster with a rope he'd brought from the raft. When he pulled out the creature's head, Mr. Peabody's assistant Hank was revealed. Hank dropped a walkie-talkie from under his costume. I wonder who he was communicating with, the fiend said as he picked it up. I think I know, said Big Dave as he walked out of the woods. In one mighty fist, he carried Mr. Peabody, who also had a walkie-talkie. Put me down, you Lamox, Mr. Peabody cried. You can't do this to me. Peabody had Hank pretend to be the marsh monster to scare away visitors. He hoped that would force Mr. Smalls to sell his rafting business, Velma said. And it almost worked. With the mystery of the marsh monster solved, the gang was ready to return to their rafting trip. Shaggy and Scooby restocked the raft with plenty of food, including nuts and berries, of course. Kids, you saved my business, Mr. Smalls waved as the gang started off down the river. I can't thank you enough. And you prevented a greedy man from ruining another precious forest, called Big Dave. Like it was our pleasure and our duty, said Shaggy with a grin. Right, Scoob? Scooby-Dooby-Doo! Cheers, Scooby. Thanks for watching.